Good morning. Today I want to look at the topic of religion and violence. A lot of people today say that religion is the cause of so much violence and conflict in the world. And you can understand why they would say something like that. Look at the Middle East, for example, probably the most religious part of the world and yet also the most violent and divided part of the earth. But it would be very simplistic and naive to think that if you had a magic wand and you could get rid of all religion from the planet, that you would usher in a period of peace and harmony. World War I and World War II were not religious wars. Pol Pot, Stalin, Chairman Mao were all atheists, and yet they led probably the most violent regimes in human history. You see, politics or religion aren't really the problem. It's the human heart, it's the human mind. It's in the human heart and mind that the seed of violence exists, and it's there that it must ultimately be confronted. Good, healthy religion will help deal with that seed. Unhealthy, immature, bad religion will in fact help that seed to grow. The book of Genesis, written about 2,500 years ago, talks about in symbolic and figurative language the origins of all evil and violence in the world. Now, it is symbolic and it is figurative, but what it says, and for something written so long ago, it has some amazing insights which are still very relevant for today, and that's what I'm going to be looking at. It says that the source of all evil in the world is eating of the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now notice it doesn't say eating the fruit from the tree of pride, anger, lust or greed. It says eating of the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with knowing the difference between good and evil? Isn't that what most parents try to teach their children? I'm a high school religion teacher and I've spent over 25 years trying to teach students the difference between good and evil. Teaching them the difference between good and evil is not the issue. You need to do that. You can't have a society unless we divide between good and evil and reward the good and punish the evil. We're not saying that everything is okay. What I am saying is that you cannot use that judgment to then condemn other people. So the issue is the dividing the world into groups. Now this is done by what some have called the dualistic mind, the mind that sees in black and white, the tribal mind. My tribe is the good tribe, your tribe is the bad tribe. Now my team is the good team, your team is the bad team. So the problem is, according to, I don't know if you can see that, good and bad. See, the problem is that we divide the world into two groups. One we say good, the other we say is bad. And the good group always thinks it's superior and better than the bad group. And therefore the good group condemns the bad group, hates the bad group, excludes the bad group, oppresses the bad group, and ultimately kills the bad group. Some of the ways we've done this in history, we've said that, men are better than and superior to women, and therefore we can oppress women. White people are better than black people, and therefore we can enslave black people. I mean, and this can work both ways too. Capitalist, communist, rich, poor, Christian, non-Christian. It just goes on and on. Hitler was a perfect example of this. He believed, the Aryan race were good and superior and all Jews were bad, and therefore he had the right to genocide. At this stage in history, we have IS doing the same thing. They're an extreme example of this reality. They believe that they're good and chosen by God and everybody else is bad, and they have the right to kill and behead everybody else. So you can see the effects of this in history. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychoanalyst, and he explained it in terms of the shadow. He said that every individual has within themselves a shadow, a dark side, a stain, a wound. The shadow part of your personality is everything about you that you don't want to admit to yourself, that you don't want to show to other people. It's the underdeveloped negative side to your personality that we all have. Now, the problem is not so much that we have this dark side, this shadow. The problem is when we deny it, when we think it's not there. And when we deny it, what we do, we project it on outside of ourselves onto other people, onto other individuals, or onto other groups. For example, Hitler projected all the evil in the world onto the Jews, and therefore he thought he could kill the Jews. IS is projecting all the evil onto the world, all the evil in the world onto the West, and believe that they can kill the Westerners. So we've got to be very careful at this stage in history that, you know, the clash of civilizations, that we don't project our evil onto some other group. We've got to learn to see and accept the evil within ourselves. Jesus was never critical of sinners. He was always critical of those people who thought that they were not sinners, and that's why he spoke so strongly and so consistently against hypocrisy. When we project the evil onto another group, onto an individual or onto another group, we scapegoat that group. We punish them for all the so-called evil in the world. Now, the word scapegoat comes from Leviticus 16. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the Jews had this ritual where they would choose a goat, and the priest would pray over that goat and lay all the sins of his people onto that goat. And then that they would chase the goat out into the wilderness, and that's where we get the term the escaped goat. Now, if we don't have that ritual, what we do, we place all our evil, all our issues onto an individual or onto another group and blame them for all the problems in the world. Now, we all have this tendency. We all do it. We are all naturally born with this, with the dualistic mind, with the judgmental mind. It is the original sin. It happens in the playground when kids divide into the different cliques, you know, the cool group and the nerdy group, the sporty kids and the brainy kids. Happens in families. Every family has its black sheep. And at family gatherings, everybody talks about the black sheep, you know, the alcoholic uncle or the wayward niece or whatever. It happens in the workplace between management and workers. Happens between countries. We all do it. It's the original sin. And the problem is the splitting, the dividing. It leads to splits, it leads to divisions, and it leads to condemnations of the other group. The very word diabolical means to split apart. And it's this sense of separateness that is the issue. We think we're separate from other people. We think we're separate from the environment. We think we're separate from God. And it's always the work of the Spirit. The work of God is to bring together, to unite. That's the work of the Spirit. Now, the problem with religion is that religion at its lower, immature levels, it can provide a perfect cover for this process, because now you're doing it in the name of God. You're doing it in the name of religion. Because religion, in its early stages, by its very nature, divides the world into clean and unclean, good and bad, saint, sinner, sacred, secular, kosher, unkosher, halal, haram. It just goes on and on. Christian, non-Christian, believer, unbeliever. It's ironic, I think, today that even the atheists are doing it now, but their division is between, intelligent atheist and stupid believer. They're playing the same game. It's just a different jersey. Now, how do I know this is wrong? Because the Gospels show that Jesus was caught up in this process. He was killed by this process. Jesus was continually criticized, attacked, questioned, challenged, and eventually arrested and killed by the religious fanatics and fundamentalists of his day. So Jesus on the cross becomes the eternal symbol of what fanaticism and fundamentalism does to God. It kills God. It rejects God in the name of God. Jesus on the cross becomes the symbol of fanatical, fundamentalistic way of thinking. What it does in the name of God, it rejects compassion, it rejects peace, it rejects love, and it rejects mercy. All in the name of God. So this is the danger of religion. And as I said before, at the moment in history, IS is the perfect example of this. It's the extreme example of this. In the name of God, they are committing the most unbelievable atrocities. If you want an extreme Christian example of this, look up the Westboro Baptist Church and GodHatesFags.com, and you'll see it's just full of hatred. It's full of bile, but they believe that they're justified in doing it because they're doing it in the name of God. And as I said, Jesus was caught up and killed by this very same process. So in my next video, I want to look at how Jesus identifies the process and how he saves us from this process, which is indeed why he's the Saviour of the world. Thank you for listening.